You need to
Sure.
get a copy of this. I'm going to put a link in my YouTube channel below.
There's something you said about the Japanese culture that really resonated with me. And it's that they respect their history. They respect their present. They're not out there with their phones when they're sitting in personal development seminars like so many of the rest of us. And living where I live, I'm very familiar with the Japanese culture and the Japanese American culture, the mindset. And there's not another culture on the planet that respects more than this culture. They honor more than anyone else too. And here's the point of it, that this principle that I've learned about mentoring over the years is that you cannot receive from that which you don't respect. So what you respect comes towards you. What you don't make room for in your heart to respect bounces off of you. So in other words, if I honor you and what you're saying and I have respect for you, my heart is open and I'm able to receive. If I don't honor you, my heart is closed. If I'm not honoring you with my attention, my listening, if I'm not taking notes, my heart is closed. So what you don't respect is repelled. What you do respect, you're able to receive and then grow and level up. You had asked me earlier to share a little bit of my past with you. And one thing I'll share with you is I'm a man of faith. I have been for many years. And there's this phenomenal story in the New Testament. And believe it or not, the headline of the story is you have the ability to stop God from working in your life. It's very simply this. Jesus was in his hometown, the people that he had grown up with, and everybody knew him. But he couldn't do any miracles there, so he had to leave that place to go to another place to fulfill it. So, and if you ask yourself, what shut God himself down? Because God doesn't bully anyone, right? But people didn't respect him, so they couldn't receive from him. And once he realized he couldn't do what he was called to do in that place, he left that place and went to some place where they would receive him. In fact, it's interesting, later in the New Testament, he even gives his disciples the instructions, and he says, if you go to a place and they don't receive you, shake the dust off your feet and leave. And that's so important in mentoring, because those relationship and mentoring principles that he talked about, they're very alive today. If you enter a seminar, I always say that the way you enter a book determines what you get out of a book. The way you walk into a seminar or a learning environment determines what you get out of it. If you respect it, you can receive from it, because your heart is open and then your learner is turned on.
You know, once you've captured their heart, that audience's heart, then you can capture their mind, and they're willing to absorb it. And so if you're speaking into an audience, and obviously I've used the term that if we have a lump of clay in front of us, and even the Bible talks about clay, right?
Absolutely.
If we have a lump of clay that we're manipulating, and there we go. We're using the word manipulate without it being a bad word.
No, manipulation, by the way, is, you know, here's the difference, by the way. I'm glad you brought that up, because as you know, I wrote a sales book, Persuade. Sales to a lot of people is a 4-letter word because they think it's manipulation. But here's the difference. If I'm trying to, there it is. If I'm trying to move you for selfish benefit, that's manipulation, because I'm trying to take advantage of you. And don't ever do business with those kind of people. But if I'm trying to move you for mutual benefit, that's motivation. So there's a lot of great business people out there that learn the art of persuasion and communication and influence. And they use those skills to help people make good decisions for their lives. And that's who the great salesmakers are.
And I see the word persuasion and manipulation entwined with each other in a positive way. And
Yes.
Again, like the clay, the more you move it, the more pliable it becomes, and the more warm it becomes, you know. And once you warm that clay up by the movement, that friction that keeps going on as you're placing your fingers through it, or you're kneading it, then it becomes more shapeable, and
Yes.
you can shape it into that piece of art that you truly want it to become. And don't we do the same thing when
Yes.
when we're mentoring others or we're coaching others, or you're doing something in front of an audience from the stage?
Yes.
Don't you feel sometimes like you're actually like a lump of clay? You're in their minds and in their hearts, working
Yes.
it, warming it up,
Yes.
pliable, more shapeable to where you want to take them. And that's a big
Absolutely.
responsibility, because so many times people with that type of leadership ability, I don't want to call it charisma necessarily, because charisma
Yes.
can come into play there, but it is called persuasiveness, influence, manipulation, all in a positive way. It can be in a negative way when you have that much of a mantle of influence on you in front of that audience, though, can it?
Is it positive or negative? It depends on what your motive is, because the skills of persuasion, the skills of building influence, you can become a master at them. And if you're going to use them to help people, then you are a great messenger. You are a great mentor. If you're just going to use them to use people for yourself, well, we've got a word for those people. And those, the people's spidey senses go off when you get around them, right? And one of the things that comes to mind, and I want to put a little steak on your plate for a second, just from Persuade, and for those watching, whether you're speaking from a platform and you've got 100 or 1,000 in the room, or one-on-one like this, there's two very simple ways, because you do have to touch the heart before you reach for the wallet. The law of connection, which is the first chapter in Persuade, says that a salesmaker communicates and connects emotionally. They connect emotionally before communicating financially. This invisible line between the heart and the wallet. So regardless of the business you're in, whether you're a network marketer, you're running a bank, a small business, or you're an employee somewhere, there's two very simple techniques I've learned you can develop within yourself, that you don't even need an outside mentor, that you can move anyone from point A to B. And it's simply this. And again, this works one-on-one or with thousands. The first one is telling stories or a testimony. You've heard the saying before that facts tell, but stories sell. So look, if there's something in your life that's impacted you and it's moved you emotionally, whether it's, I went into this network marketing business and here's how it's helped others and it's changed my life, and it can do the same for you, and you're telling that story, or here's why your company should do business with ours, because here's what we're doing to make a difference. Whatever that story is that moves you, if it moves you, learn how to tell it in a way so it moves other people, because people connect with stories, right? And that's one of the ways to lead and not push people in persuasion, to lead in selling versus push. The second one is simply this. When you said that the heart is like clay, and don't you feel like, Scott, sometimes you're kind of working that clay? Here's one of the greatest ways, especially in one-on-one, if you're coaching someone, or if I'm working with an employee or even a customer, it's to learn the art of conversation through questions. Let me give you an example. If somebody goes into sales and they go into business first, and you're doing a teaching and you've taught across the world in countries and continents, that's why you're so successful, people gravitate towards you. I know one of the things you teach is how to ask questions, how to become a master asker, because when we ask questions, it pulls people toward us. When we make statements, it pushes them away from us emotionally. But if you can learn to have a whole conversation, asking mostly questions, right? One mouth, two ears. A master asker learns how to lead people to discover what they already know is true within themselves. And every truth that we uncover, we own. You don't have to convince people of it, because it's their truth. One of the greatest mentors of all time, I know you've told the story in your seminars before. Remember the story of Socrates and what he would do? He would sit in the town square, and how did he teach people? You're a master teacher. I know you do this all the time. He would ask questions to let the audience figure it out. And when I'm speaking from a pulpit or in meetings every week for my organization, I will come up in the middle of my talk with poignant questions I can ask, and then I'll give space in the room for the mentor within of each person, that muse, to answer. Zig Ziglar called it the pregnant pause, right? But if you can find the right questions to ask, not just needs-based stuff to help you sell somebody or move them or lead them, What's the question of the moment that's going to have an impact in the heart? That's how you start to mold that heart, because it brings blood to the heart, right? And it starts to pull them towards you. That's why, by the way, this is Persuade on a hockey puck. You can see the magnet. When you ask questions, that you become the magnet that pulls people towards you. So I know you're very good at that. That's why people gravitate towards you from around the world.
Now, what caused you to use the word SalesMaker?
Two of the mentors that have impacted my life the most was Tom Hopkins when I was in my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much from Tom. I didn't even meet him for the first few years, but I spent hundreds of hours with his tapes, and you know, he had a real estate bent in his stuff. And I always ask myself, well, I don't sell real estate, so I have to ask myself, a good student always asks, how do you apply this, right? But Tom's word for the sales profession was champions. As I moved into leadership, John Maxwell became a big mentor for me, and his big word is leaders. And I needed a word that hadn't been used before. And here's the connection. I like the word salesmaker, but everyone is in the sales business. Here's what I mean. The difference between influence and persuasion is influence means to have an effect on people. Persuasion means to actually move people. So now watch this, Jeff. From the cradle to the grave, everybody is persuading. Everybody is selling. The question is, are you any good at it? So speakers are trying to capture an audience's attention. They're trying to persuade. A seller tries to sell a customer a product. A singer sings in a way so fans will buy their album. Leaders lead so as to gain influence and get people to follow. Teachers teach so as to capture the student's heart. Everyone's trying to move somebody. Everyone's in the sales or persuasion business. We're all sales makers. The question is, are you any good at it? So when you realize that everybody wants something, you realize that you're trying to persuade somebody. And we learned this from the time we're babies in the crib, right? You have kids, I'm sure. The baby starts to cry, mommy brings a bottle, the baby learns what works, right? So we're always trying to move people to win them over so they'll buy into our ideas, they'll buy into our concepts, they'll buy our product, they'll follow us if they're employees. And if you learn the art of persuasion, not just the art of influence, because influence is enough, you'll become more successful. And it doesn't matter what your profession is, because at the end of the day, influence and persuasion, they're cousins, right? They're first cousins. The skills are similar, but they are different, because influence will have an effect on people. It will draw people towards you to follow. But in business, there's not a box in the W-2 or the 1099 about how much you influence. In the sales profession, you have to close or you don't eat. In the sales profession, you've got to be able to move people, and you know this because you've taught this around the world.
We're talking about persuading people.
Yes.
We're talking about influencing people. But, okay, we're talking to a lot of people out there that may not want to be a speaker. They may not want to be an influencer necessarily. But if they do, they're going to have to learn how to be influenced and to listen and to absorb whatever persuasion that is coming their way. So it's just like, you know, we mentioned the Bible momentarily. You mentioned about it earlier, you mentioned the word, and it says specifically, I'm persuaded that neither life, nor death, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, and things to come. I mean, you know, all these things that are influences in our lives.
Yes.
Are persuading us if we let it.
If we let it.
What
right.
can you say to that person out there that maybe that lump of clay called themselves, right? We're all a lump of clay to a certain extent. We're a vessel, what have you. Sometimes we're cracked pots, right? But what if that person feels a little bit of cold? In other words, they're a cold piece of clay. They don't want to be as pliable as, in other words, what advice, Scott, would you give them to say, soften up? Allow yourself to be influenced. Allow yourself to take those walls down, those barriers. Maybe you've been hurt, or maybe you've been a failure at certain things, and you feel like you're going to be a failure at other things. Listen, we all failed at holding a spoon at one time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but we didn't stop trying.
Yes.
So the question I'm asking you here, and I'm really taking you in angles here based on.
I like that. No, this is great.
But it's one thing to influence someone. It's another thing to actually accept that influence, that persuasion. So persuade me as if I'm
Yes.
that person out there in the world that
Yeah.
needs.
So let's take business out of this for a minute. Let's just talk to the 18-year-old or the 28-year-old who isn't very successful. Maybe they've had some hurts in the past, like you've said. They're not motivated like, the millions of people that have heard you throughout your career or that follow you. They're not wired that way. So here's what I would say to the closed heart. Look, the secret of success is to become a student. The secret of mastery starts with becoming a student. You're going to become a student of some sort, but here's what it is. There's really two ways to learn through life. You can learn through mentors or you can learn from mistakes. If you turn on that learned heart within inside of you and you open up and you're willing to be influenced, you're willing to be changed, you realize, my gosh, there's something more that I want in life. I don't know maybe what I want, but I know I don't want to stay where I'm at. In the past doesn't take you forward. You're going to have to surround yourself with new people, new relationships. But everybody wants something. Nobody wants to stay stuck. So even if you failed, part of the learned heart perspective is to ask yourself, okay, I can use this failure and this can cause me to close my heart and remain in my heart. Or I can ask myself this, how does this become a mentor? Because if it becomes a mentor, your experiences then become tutors that lead to transformation. But if you let mistakes become pain, they become tortures. So your memories that may cause you to have a closed heart are either torturing you, right? And keeping you stuck and keeping you there. Or if you flip it around and you ask yourself, how can I use what's happened to me to grow from it? One of my favorite Chinese proverbs is that if you want to know the way, ask somebody on the way back. So whatever you're going through, someone's gone through it before. There's hope, and there's somebody who can lead you out of that valley to the next mountaintop. So again, whether you're 18 or 28, 38, if you've got a closed off heart, find that person, and they're much closer than you realize. They're in a book, they're in a podcast. They may be watching you right now, Jeff.
When I'm training people in my systematic approach, which I call the Action Pro 90 system, but that system teaches everyone in follow-up, their first steps is to win trust. It's not to get a yes. It's to establish trust. Then you establish commitment.
Absolutely.
So establishing that trust. So what you're telling me here, for people to be able to open up, we as the influencers, we as the persuaders, we need to establish some level of trust. So if we're coming back from that path,
yes,
you just mentioned,
yeah,
what you're telling me is, if you want someone to influence you or someone to advise you or someone to give you that guidance, they need to have been there before so that you can trust them of where they've been. You can trust the fact that they know where they've gone and that they can tell you how to get there. So trial and error is not something that necessarily dominates the people that we pass wisdom on to, because the wisdom offsets and alters and pushes aside trial and error. So there's less trials. I'm not saying there's not going to be any trials, but there's going to be less trials, less errors if we attach ourselves to mentors with wisdom that have been there.
Yes.
And that's trust.
Yes.
Trust.
Very well said.
So,
one of the things that is interesting, because you were talking about what do you say to the person that maybe not be business oriented, you're trying to get them to open that cold heart of clay so they'll listen to somebody. Their biggest issue is they may have made a decision in their life. Maybe they followed the wrong person and it didn't work out. They bought a big stock and it failed. They were in a relationship that betrayed them. The list goes on. And that's why they don't trust. So for that person, the first person they've got to reconcile with is themselves. You've got to be able to forgive yourself so the heart opens up. A lot of times that's what's holding people back, because until you forgive yourself, you're going to have a hard time trusting other people, because we see the world through our own lens, right? But I would encourage who's ever listening, is if you feel like that heart is a cold lump of clay, give yourself a break. Look, if God's willing to forgive you, and you probably have people in your life you've had to forgive. Don't you think you yourself deserve a break? So fail forward. That's what we're all focused on.
Absolutely. This is Jeff Welch. We're talking to Scott Hogle here today on the interview, and he is the author of Persuade. Actually, #1 best-selling author with Amazon 2018. And the foreword is by Tom Hopkins. And anybody that knows Tom Hopkins, he's not going to put his stamp of approval on something unless it's absolutely a phenomenal book. Actually ask everyone to pick up a copy of this, and I'm sure Scott would want everyone to know where to pick it up.
There's actually a couple places. Amazon, of course, which is today the world's largest bookstore. But there's also a place, Barnes and Noble. One of the most exciting calls I've ever received in my career, Jeff, was Barnes and Noble's only, the actual data point is there's 2.2 million books published a year, but they only accept 5%. The day I got the call from my podium Persuade in their brick and mortar stores, I was so excited. So you can pick it up on Amazon, it'll be delivered on your doorstep tomorrow, or you can run down to your local Barnes and Noble.
So Amazon or Barnes and Noble, either one holds your book. Wow,
Yeah.
That's excellent, excellent. And by the way, I have a signed copy of Persuade. Scott, thank you for signing that for me. And I have a phenomenal library of signed books.
Yes, you do.
This one is going in that library. I'm going to throw this at you. You've got some major endorsements going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Book Persuade. Amazing endorsements. And those endorsements are people from executives from Facebook all the way to Amazon, to Dell, to Zillow, to Microsoft. How did you get all these major endorsements for your book? I have to hear the story behind that.
Yeah, I'll first tell you the genesis of the inspiration. So the book was done, and when a book's done, the last thing a writer wants to do is add another chapter. But I felt really inspired because mentorship had played such a role in my life since my teens. In fact, if it wasn't for good mentors along the way, frankly, I would not have the success that I've had in sales and leadership and writing and speaking. So I wanted to put a mentoring section in the book. So at the end of every chapter, there's this section called CIA. Let's just call it this inspiration that came over me. And the thought was, mentoring's been such an important part of my life. Why don't I get other experts to contribute to the book? So the reader who's purchased my book, they basically hired me to come alongside of them and mentor them. And there's 3 themes in Persuade, really. There's the theme of relationships, there's the theme of salesmanship, and then there's the theme of mentorship. And these themes run throughout all 7 chapters. And my goal was, I wanted people to learn how to teach themselves and then learn from other experts. So here's how you teach yourself. The CIA section, what I asked the reader to do, and I put this in the introduction, is as they read the book, make special note of what connects with them. That's the C in the CIA. And by the way, this is how you turn on your learner. Everything you read in the book, you don't necessarily need, but the stuff that resonates with you, if it's resonating for a reason. And whether you want to say that's your muse within, that's God, that's the universe speaking to you. If it's resonating in your heart, you only need one idea to change your life. I would suggest to you that you're probably going to find a lot of things in each chapter that's going to impact you, but make special note of it. And that's what connected with you. That's the C. But if it's resonating for a reason. So the I in the CIA stands for insight. So I asked the reader that after you've identified the few things in each chapter that have connected with you, ask yourself this question: what insight are you getting? Because there's an insight for you that's going to help you in your life. How can this help you? How can this help others? How can you import it? How can you export it? That's the insight. And then finally, the A is, it's resonated with you, it's connected, you've got an insight. What action will you take? And that's really where the transformation happens. So whether you're reading a book or you're in your seminars, when you give people and encourage them to follow the CIA process, they can take the wisdom of the universe, the wisdom that's come from other people's experience, apply it and take action in their life. And that's where the transformation happens.
I like that. I like that. Now, there's one area in your book I want to bring out in the open, and that you don't just talk about acquiring clients or acquiring people that you're selling to, your customers, but you also talk about repairing repairing the relationship between you and your clients. Can you reiterate that before all the audience on the call here? Because I personally see so many people think, well, I've burned my list up. I've messed up. I don't have anyone else because I've already ruined my opportunity with these people. But you've actually covered that, haven't you?
Here's what I've learned in the years of selling. Ironically, very early in my career, and I went into selling business to business when I was 20 years old. Imagine a 20-year-old trying to give a 45-year-old advice. And ironically, I learned how to close people before I learned how to connect with them, Jeff. And what you can do is burn through people if your focus is just to get their business. One of the things that causes call reluctance, that physical, emotional apprehension that would stop somebody from picking up the phone or going to meet a new client, is our mental focus. One of the ways that I've mind hacked my mental focus, and I talk about this actually in the book in the last chapter, is instead of looking for financial customers, look for friendships, people that you want to connect with. And again, this becomes a motive thing. If I'm trying to sell you just for myself, that's selfish benefit, that's manipulation. But if I believe I can help you, what I'm going to want to do first is establish a connection. So the whole piece of repairing comes in is that if you're focused on building relationships, the revenue will follow. And if you have a relationship, there will be times where you dropped a ball or the company didn't deliver, or maybe something happened, but you sense that friction. And it's always better to prepare than it is to repair. But in the times you find yourself having to go back because something's broken, there's a relationship acronym in the first chapter of the Law of Connection that gives you a few questions you can ask yourself to hopefully uncover what might be causing the friction.
You mentioned restorative, about SalesMakers regularly replenish mental, emotional, physical, spiritual energy stores, which allow them to remain at the top of their game. So it's one thing to restore your clients as far as restoring that relationship, but it's another thing to restore yourself, isn't it? As far as sometimes our battery just gets low and our mojo goes away. And I've seen people that have years of sales success behind them, but before you know it, they get down emotionally. Sometimes people even get into a deep depression and quit believing that they even have it anymore.
Everybody will face it, whether you're in business or not. There comes a time when your circuits are burned. You've bumped up against the guardrails so often in your life. You've worked more hours. You're not getting enough sleep. You're not taking care of yourself. You're just burning out. I'll tell you that. So that's only a couple of pages, and it's the last teaching point in the entire book. I'm glad you brought it out. Let me tell you where the genesis of that came from, where I knew I had to put that in. I'm a man of faith. I've shared that with you. A good friend of mine is Pastor Wayne Cordero. He's the pastor of New Hope, the biggest church in the Foursquare movement. He wrote a book a number of years ago that I picked up. It was called Leading on Empty. And it's his story of burnout. He was in his 50s. And he's very candid about what got him to that. And if you're in business and you're focused on success, you're what I would call a corporate or entrepreneurial athlete. You're always pushing yourself. And if you don't know how to manage yourself, you will burn out. And it's interesting because whenever I go to conferences and people find out where I go to church, they always said, is that guy that wrote? It's a very interesting book. But he talks about restorative there. And I apply that to my business world. And at some point, you're going to get burned out. You have to learn how to recharge on the run. Now, let me tell you what I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about planning an extra vacation. I'm not talking about putting your phone down when you're on vacation, because you've got to learn to recharge on the run. You've got to learn how to, one, put yourself in an inspiring environment on a daily basis. That can mean little quiet time in the car or a corner of your house, or maybe you're listening to a podcast at the gym where you're just investing in you. Because in business and in sales and leading, you're constantly expending emotional energy. It's the most taxing thing. And you will get depleted every day. So you've got to recharge every day. So one of the ways I do that is for me, I start my days with the scriptures. That's very inspiring to me. And I've learned how to let the scriptures talk to me and read my life. And I spend time in that. But as I go through my day too, I'll actually, when I go to the gym, Jeff, I will literally, like yesterday, I was listening to this podcast that inspired me. So I'm always looking for ways to restore, because if I don't stay full, I can't give away what I don't have. So, for some people, I'm going to go sit on the beach for a little while. For some people, I'm going to go running at night. For some people, I need to go do a day spa thing. For some women, it's getting together with their girlfriends and doing, my wife is very good at this. They call it retail therapy. But you've got to find that happy space every day, not once in a week or 2 weeks you're on vacation, so you can restore on the run. When you do that, you can perform at a high level all the time.
Elaborate on that. How it's one thing when you're telling people to recharge the battery, right? Take a break. But it's another thing to recharge on the run. I mean, you're telling people to actually gain energy while they're still moving.
Yes.
So what's your secret?
There's a lot of dead space. There's a lot of can't see hours. There's a lot of moments you can capture. You've got to find out what inspires you and then repurpose those moments. I'll give you an example. If you don't have a waking moment, you don't have a moment to spare from the time you wake up to the time maybe you don't have time to go for a run or go to the gym, or you don't have 45 minutes to start your day with a book. What you can do is you can turn the TV off at night, and instead of going to bed with your brain still going like this, you can enter a book, read something inspiring, read a story, an autobiography, or Persuade in this case.
That's right. They can read Persuade.
There you go. You knew that was coming.
Right.
So there's places you can replenish on the run, even standing in the line at a supermarket. There may be a podcast or something you're listening to on your phone or something you're reading. John Maxwell, we talked about him earlier. His dad always taught him to keep a book in the glove compartment. How many hours do we spend in the car every day? There's audio mentors we could be learning from. And if you like to, I've learned that there are 3 types of people. There's audio mentors. There's what I would call, readers. But then there's also people who are learners because of, let's call them TV people. They're visual. Well, most people spend a few hours a day in the car going to and from work. That's time that can be repurposed instead of being entertained.
Instead of going into road rage.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Use it to build yourself up.
Everyone out there has a hunger for growing. They have a hunger for self-development, a hunger for leadership, or a hunger for making themselves better than they were yesterday. That's what it's all about, right? And I want you to start that out with, why should someone actually want to become better? Why not just float through life? Why not just be on automatic pilot? Because I've heard so many people say, I'm okay like I am. I really don't need to be putting any pressure on myself to be any better than I am. I'm one of those that actually, I don't know if I can handle that kind of conversation too often every day. Because people do that. That means they're stagnant, they're complacent. They don't want to grow for a reason, and disciplines matter, right? So, and this book is full of disciplines. I see that. This book is a disciplinary piece of literature that you put together here with the book Persuade. And I want to tell everyone that's listening, you need to get a copy of this. I'm going to put a link in my YouTube channel below so that you'll be able to order this book on Amazon, and you can also order it on Barnes & Noble. So Scott Hogle being a #1 best-selling author with Amazon 2018. That's a very, very prestigious title to have. I have several of my friends that have those #1 best-selling author positions with Amazon. And I'm telling you, Scott, you hit a home run with Persuade, Scott Hogle. Now, Scott, give everyone that's listening that power punch
Sure.
that they need to hear when it comes to actually making their lives better, and what Persuade, the book, the 7 empowering laws of the sales maker.
Sure.
And I want everyone to hear from you, the genius.
Let me first talk to the person who is plateaued. They're comfortable where they're at. I understand that. I've got a lot of those people that work for me sometimes. There's A, B, and C players, right? The A's are always pushing. Sometimes the B's are like, you know, I'm making just enough. My family's happy. Why should I work harder? I think there's a couple things for that. One is you're destined for more. You're destined for greatness. We're meant to continue to climb through the seasons of life, not to plateau. You're meant to be a pioneer, not a settler. Here's your motivation for wanting to get going and grow yourself too. Number one, growth isn't automatic. What got you to where you're at in your current level of success won't keep you there. You're going to have to grow past where you were. But the good news is you can begin investing in yourself today. And that's what mentorship is all about. It's really about recognizing that you've got this incredible potential beneath the surface. It's within the human heart. The human spirit is pliable, so is the mind, and it can be developed, it can be grown. And if you're comfortable, then do it for the people that you love. If you've got families on this call, you know, success isn't just about money, it's what the money can do in your life. It's for private schools, it's for a better way of life, it's for better vacations, it's for giving your kids a better leg up one day, it's for that first car, it's for giving your husband or wife a better quality, it's for fixing problems, and that's what money is. It's a tool. So with every level of success, there's usually money, there's significance, there's more influence, your skills are going up. And if you don't need any more, get more so you have more to give away. And that's what the heart of that's the difference, by the way, between success or significance. Success says this is what I want to do to add value to myself, but significance will allow you to add value to other people. It's others focused. So growth isn't automatic. Pick up a copy of Persuade today, watch more of Jeff's YouTube videos, because you have the ability to change the trajectory of your life starting today. And even if it's not for you, get other people focused for your family, your friends, and your community, because the more you have, the more you can give away. That's true not just about wealth, but it's about the wisdom that you have. So that's the message for the person that thinks growth is automatic. It's not. Or for the person who's not motivated to grow themselves, then do it for the people you love.
Scott, you mentioned something there, and it's wealth, prosperity, income, money, whatever you want to call it. Some people actually make that a bad word, but it's not that money is the root of all evil. It's that the love of money is the root of all evil. Some people misquote that. I mean, I always look at this cup. I mean, you know, of course, the cup says definitely awesome dad on it, right? What I'm drinking in here is what I'm enjoying, right? That's what I'm enjoying. That's what I love. Let's just use that in here as being my family.
Yes.
And the cup is a tool that holds that in place, and it secures it. It puts a little bit of security around that so it doesn't just go everywhere unmanageable, right? And I look at the cup as being the symbolism of the money, right? So I don't love the cup. I love what's in the cup. That's why I'm holding the cup. I'm not going to hold the cup in it being empty and drinking out of an empty cup. It would be useless. It'd be
right.
It would be pointless. But the cup has a meaning and a usage, has a purpose. Just like money is a tool. You just said that a moment ago. Money is a tool. This cup is a tool. Some people have this out of perspective. But the education for my children, the well-being of my children and grandchildren, and whatever else is going on with my family, that's what I love, my family. Money and income and prosperity is all about using that wealth as a tool to
Absolutely.
secure good boundaries and good freedoms and good whatevers for your family and for yourself. So
yes,
you know, I look at it this way. Prosperity is a testimony. It's a great testimony. I'm not saying that you have to be wealthy to be a Christian. You don't have to be wealthy to be a Christian. You can be very poor and be a Christian. It doesn't, sometimes we take the word wealth and we misinterpret it. It's not all about just money, is it? But at the same time, if the God that we serve is the one who actually created all this, he's also the one who can bless us as well if we're obedient. You know, all these things will be added unto you, right? You know,
So you're bringing up an interesting principle.
Him, you got to seek him first. If we seek God first, and so many times we say we put God first, but really do we? You know, I mean, that's another story and an old different call altogether. But if we really put God first and we put him at the center of our world, then yes, we can expect a lot of blessings to come our way, and he'll fill our cup until it runs over then, right?
It's true. So you bring up a very interesting point, and even for people who are listening or watching this who aren't people of faith, so some people want relationship with God because they want what's in his heart. Some people want relationship because they want what's in his hand. Some people love the person of Jesus. Some people just leverage the principles of Jesus but don't want the person. And I respect both because God respects both. The principle you're talking about is seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. That's Matthew 6:33. But even if you're not at that point where you want relationship with God, here's the promise that Jesus promised. Whatever you put me first in, I will bless. So that's the seek ye first principle. And so let's talk about some of the different wells of wealth. It's not just about money, but if you put God's principles first, and there's a lot of those in the book of Persuade, you can become wealthy in the area of money. There's wells of relationship. If you want to become wealthy in relationships, put godly principles first in relationships. Financially and investing, put God first in that. So there's a lot of different types of wealth. In fact, here's the irony, Jeff, and I know so many of the success principles today actually came right out of the scriptures. And whether you love the scriptures, follow them or not, you can trace back what people believe to what was initially written. And again, God never pushes himself on anyone. If you just want what's in his hand and not what's in his heart, if you want the blessing and not the relationship, he doesn't resist anybody because he only comes by invitation anyways if you want him in your life. But I like what you said about the cup. In fact, so here's my little Starbucks cup today. But I have to tell you, so funny, when you were talking about the cup, I heard this great, and I want to bring this home to mentorship again, this great...
Ross here trying to get in.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Oh, beautiful puppy. Look at that. I love dogs. But there was this great quote, and the quote was, there's this great picture of this great red wine, and it says, the question is, it doesn't matter whether the cup is half empty or half full. The point is that the cup could be refilled. So the thing about our cup, your cup, is that wherever you're at in life right now, there are needs you have or needs within your circle, people at work, your family that have needs. The more you fill in your cup, and it can always be refilled, the more you can give away, the more you can serve others. And that's where significance comes from. And this is really at the heart of leadership too. If you want to have greater relationship, you're going to have greater influence with people. And how do you increase influence? By serving them, by adding value. And that's the heart of servant leadership. It's to serve those who would follow you. And the more you have, the more you can serve.